What would you do if a bank manager burned your $2.3 million check right in front of you, calling you a fraud, while thousands watched live, only to discover minutes later, you owned the bank? Tuesday afternoon, 2:47 p.m., First National Bank downtown. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, catching the polished marble floor and the quiet shuffle of customers waiting their turn. For most, it was an ordinary day, a Tuesday like any other. But in the center of the lobby, an extraordinary scene was about to unfold. Marcus Wellington, the bank manager in a tailored suit and polished shoes, stood with an expression of theatrical authority. In his hand he held a check. Not just any check. A check written out for $2,300,000. His lips curled into a smirk as he flicked open a silver lighter, the flames snapping to life with a metallic click. He raised the check for everyone to see, his voice carrying across the marble expanse. Your kind doesn't deserve real money. This fake garbage gets burned. The lighter kissed the corner of the paper, and in an instant flames raced across its surface. Gasps rippled through the bank. Some froze in place, others leaned forward, phones half-raised, unsure whether to record or to intervene. The check curled and blackened, edges crumbling into fragile ash as Wellington lifted it high, reveling in the destruction. A woman near the counter covered her mouth. Another customer whispered, "Is he really burning it?" The flames devoured the last numbers on the check before collapsing into a glowing ember. Wellington let the burning fragments fall to the floor at David Williams' feet. David, dressed in faded jeans and a gray hoodie, did not flinch. The flames licked out one final breath before dying into black dust between his white sneakers. The acrid scent of charred paper filled the lobby, clinging to the air like smoke from a battlefield. Wellington, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, ground the remains into powder with the heel of his Italian leather shoe. He twisted slowly, making sure every customer saw the act. "Look at that. Problem solved." His voice carried like a gavel striking. For a moment there was silence. Then, startlingly, an elderly woman in a Chanel suit began to clap softly, her rings glinting in the light. "That's exactly how you handle their kind," she declared. "Burn first, ask questions later." A businessman in a crisp Brooks Brothers suit nodded approvingly, muttering that it was about time someone showed backbone. Not everyone joined in. At the far side of the room a young woman paused, her phone hovering in midair, uncertain whether to live stream what she had just witnessed. Another man lowered his briefcase slowly, his jaw tight, eyes darting between David's calm face and the ashes on the floor. The bank's rhythm had broken. Conversations hushed. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, the glowing red digits marking each second. 2:48 p.m. Only a minute had passed, but it felt like hours. David remained motionless, his face a mask of stone. Not anger, not panic, but stillness. His silence stood in stark contrast to Wellington's arrogance. The check fragments clung to his sneakers like black confetti, a grotesque reminder of value destroyed. One by one, phones lifted. A blonde woman near the counter began streaming, whispering commentary under her breath. Her viewer count ticked upward. 30, then 100, then hundreds. The digital eye widened, capturing every detail, Wellington's smug grin, the ashes scattered like soot, and David's refusal to react. It was a tableau of humiliation staged for both the room and the world beyond. The security guard shifted uneasily, hand on his radio. "Sir, you need to step back," he warned. But Wellington waved him off. "This is fraud prevention. This is justice." He kicked at the ashes again, scattering them farther across the pristine marble. David's eyes lowered briefly, not to the ashes but to the clock. Another second passed, then another. 12 minutes remained before his next meeting. His calm presence, his refusal to lash out, unsettled more than the flames ever could. In that silence, in that quiet defiance, a seed was planted. This was no ordinary check, no ordinary man, and no ordinary humiliation. It was the beginning of something none of them would forget. The marble floor of First National had become more than a lobby, it was now a stage. Every movement, every word, every ember of ash seemed amplified beneath the cold fluorescent lights. Phones rose like a forest of glowing eyes, their cameras unblinking. The soft clap of the Chanel-clad woman from before had not faded, it spread. A few more hands joined in, hesitant at first, then firmer, a rhythm of approval for the cruelty they had just witnessed. Marcus Wellington lifted his chin, basking in it. He straightened his silk tie with a flourish, as if this were a performance designed for an audience that had been waiting all week. "This is how you deal with them," he announced, his voice echoing against the marble. "No hesitation. No compromise. Burn the fraud before it poisons honest people." A businessman with graying hair muttered loudly enough for half the room to hear, "Should have done that the moment he walked in." A ripple of agreement followed, some customers nodding, others smirking, their phones recording every second. David remained still, the ashes clinging to his sneakers, his face unreadable. But the spectacle around him was growing louder, uglier. The blonde woman streaming live whispered breathless commentary, her phone angled perfectly to capture both the pile of ashes and Wellington's triumphant posture. Her viewer count ticked upward, 50, then 100, then hundreds more in the space of minutes. On screens far beyond that lobby, comments began to flood. "Savage manager. Burn the scammer. Justice live." Yet buried among the flames of approval, a different kind of comment appeared. "Wait, why destroy it without checking first?" Another, "Hold on, isn't this illegal?" A third, "That guy looks too calm for a scammer." For every dozen comments cheering Wellington, one slipped through the cracks like a whisper of doubt, faint but present. Inside the bank, however, the louder voices belonged to those who applauded. The elderly woman smiled approvingly, her pearls glinting as she declared, "Finally someone with backbone." A group of teenagers near the ATM laughed nervously, one muttering, "This is going viral." They turned their cameras toward David, treating his stillness like part of the show. Marcus spread his arms wide, like a conductor addressing an orchestra of prejudice. "Look at him. Clothes from Goodwill. A fake check bigger than most people make in a year. Did you really think you could fool us?" He ground his heel into the ashes again, scattering black fragments across the polished floor. The scent of charred paper lingered, sharp and acrid, a smell no one could ignore. Some coughed quietly, others wrinkled their noses, but no one dared tell the manager to stop. The security guard shifted, torn between duty and the pressure of the growing crowd. "Sir, maybe we should," he began, but Marcus cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Stay back. Fraud prevention is my responsibility." A young woman near the entrance whispered to her friend, "Should we be watching this?" Her friend shrugged, eyes locked on her phone screen as the live chat scrolled by too fast to read. Hundreds of viewers now, voices from far away joining the chorus. "Burn it again. Show him." Yet the whispers of doubt returned. "Isn't this discrimination? This doesn't feel right. Are we sure he's a fraud?" Those doubts were drowned in noise, but they existed. They mattered. David's silence became heavier with each second. His calm was no longer just strange, it was unnerving. The more Marcus strutted and boasted, the more David's refusal to react seemed to question the entire performance. The clock ticked. 2:50 p.m. 5 minutes had passed since the fire. 5 minutes of humiliation captured from every angle. Wellington turned toward Sarah Mitchell, the assistant manager hovering nervously behind the counter. "Take notes, Sarah. This is training material. This is how you stop criminals." Her lips parted, then closed again. She nodded stiffly, but her eyes betrayed her unease. The crowd noticed her discomfort, though they did not speak of it. The phones kept rolling. The comments kept climbing. 700 viewers. 900. Over 1,000. A man in a gray suit whispered to his colleague, this is better than television. And in a way, it was. Live drama, no script, unfolding in real time. But beneath the surface of that performance, beneath the applause and cruel laughter, a fracture had begun. Those scattered comments online, those furtive glances in the lobby, the nervous shifting of the guard in Sarah's eyes, they hinted at something no one yet dared to say out loud. What if Marcus was wrong? What if the ashes on the floor were not proof of fraud, but proof of arrogance? The air tightened. The audience was not united. They thought they were watching humiliation, but something else was growing, subtle and unseen. Doubt had entered the room. And doubt spreads faster than fire. 2:55 p.m. The red digits on the wall clock glowed like a warning light as the tension inside First National thickened. For nearly 8 minutes Marcus Wellington had controlled the room, his voice booming, his ego swelling, the ashes of a burned check scattered across the marble like evidence of his triumph. Now he raised a hand sharply and barked at the security team. Cuff him. Fraud suspect. Secure before he bolts. The guards hesitated, their radios buzzing with static, their eyes flicking from David's calm expression to the growing crowd. The blonde woman's live stream had crossed 2,000 viewers, comments exploding across the screen. Lock him up. Justice served. But among them a new rhythm appeared. Something feels off. Too calm. Who is this guy? Sarah Mitchell, standing stiffly behind the counter, could feel the edges of her instincts fraying. She had worked in banking long enough to know when something didn't add up. Her gaze swept David discreetly, not the ashes at his feet but the man himself. His hoodie looked ordinary, his jeans faded, but the details told another story. On his wrist, beneath the cuff, gleamed a Swiss watch, the kind she knew cost more than her yearly salary. His wallet, when Wellington had snatched it earlier, had flashed a platinum Amex, genuine, unmistakable. And now, half visible from his jacket pocket, a first-class boarding pass. Chicago to Tokyo. Departure tomorrow morning. Sarah's breath caught. None of this aligned with the picture Wellington painted for the audience. She leaned in, whispering urgently. Marcus, maybe we should slow down, something doesn't feel right. Look at his, but Wellington cut her off before she could finish, snapping his fingers at the guards like a director shouting cues. Do your job. He's stalling for time. Every second we waste is another chance for his accomplices to cover their tracks. Sarah stepped back, her warning dismissed, but her eyes remained fixed on David. He had not spoken, not protested, not begged. Instead he sat in quiet defiance, like a man waiting for a storm to pass. That silence was louder than any defense could have been. The crowd shifted uneasily. A businessman cleared his throat. A teenager stopped laughing and lowered his phone slightly. For the first time since the flames, a hush fell across the lobby. 10 seconds of silence stretched like a held breath. Even the live stream comments slowed, viewers pausing mid-typing as if they too sensed a break in the performance. And in that quiet, David moved. Not a grand gesture, not an angry outburst. Just the simple adjustment of his sleeve, the Swiss watch catching the fluorescent light like a shard of truth cutting through illusion. The glint bounced across the marble, sharp enough that several customers noticed. One whispered, "That's not cheap." Another frowned. Wait, is he really who Wellington says he is? The silence broke as quickly as it came. Marcus, desperate to hold the stage, raised his voice again. Don't be fooled by props. Scammers know how to dress up. That watch is probably stolen. The credit card, counterfeit. The boarding pass, fake. He sneered, grinding his heel once more into the ashes as if the gesture alone could erase the unease creeping into the room. Phones lifted again, the audience hungry for more, but now their eyes darted between Wellington's theatrics and David's composure. Something about the balance had shifted. The humiliation spectacle was losing its rhythm. The guards stepped closer, cuffs ready, but their hands hesitated. Even they could sense it. David's calm wasn't fear. It was patience. It was something heavier, something that didn't fit the role Wellington had assigned him. Sarah pressed her lips together, her instincts screaming louder than the applause had minutes before. She thought again of the check, the flame, the arrogance. She thought of the quiet man who had let his worth be turned to ashes without so much as a protest. And she felt the first tremor of doubt spread through the room. The live stream counter ticked higher, 2,500 viewers. The chat scrolled too fast to read, but the split was visible now. Burn him. Fraud. But also, what if he's real? Why does he look so calm? Are we watching the wrong man get destroyed? Marcus didn't see it, or refused to. He spread his arms wide and addressed his audience like a preacher. Fraud is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And today we've caught one red-handed. But beneath his voice, beneath the clapping and the muttering, doubt lingered like smoke refusing to dissipate. The seed had been planted. Something in this story didn't add up. And the longer David sat in silence, the more that seed began to grow. 2:59 p.m. The bank lobby had transformed into a theater of humiliation, and the audience was hungry for a finale. Phones were raised high, live streams pulsing with comments, the viewer count surging past 2,000 and climbing. The guards stepped in, cuffs at the ready, their shoulders squared as though this would be the moment the so-called fraud was marched out in disgrace. Marcus Wellington's smile gleamed like polished steel, confident that the crowd and the cameras belonged to him. He spread his arms wide, savoring every second. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you stop crime in its tracks. The guard nearest to David leaned forward, voice firm. Sir, stand up. Hands where I can see them. For the first time since the fire, David moved. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from the leather chair. The crowd inhaled sharply, expecting panic, begging, perhaps even a desperate escape attempt. But instead there was nothing. He stood still. Silent. 5 long seconds passed, heavy as lead, the kind of silence that grips a room and forces even the loudest heckler to shut their mouth. The guards froze mid-step. Wellington frowned, the rhythm of his performance broken by stillness he hadn't planned for. David reached into his jacket with calm precision. Gasps broke out. Phones tilted closer. Hands twitched toward radios. The guards tensed, ready to pounce. But instead of a weapon, instead of counterfeit papers, he withdrew a single white business card. He placed it gently on the marble counter, right beside the scattered ashes of the check Marcus had destroyed. The card landed with a faint whisper, but its impact detonated like thunder. The nearest guard leaned down to read, his lips moving silently over the words before his eyes widened in shock. David Williams, Chairman and CEO, Williams Capital Group. The live stream cameras zoomed instantly, hands shaking as thousands of viewers squinted at their screens. Comments erupted in a digital explosion. Wait, what? Is this real? CEO plot twist. Marcus blinked, his smile faltering for the first time. He laughed harshly, too loud, too forced. Oh please, anyone can print a business card. $5 at a copy shop. You're not fooling me. But David wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket once more, this time producing a sleek black tablet. The guards flinched, then stilled as he powered it on with practiced ease. His fingers moved across the glass like a pianist touching familiar keys. The screen glowed with a login page the average customer had never seen before. Corporate board access. Authorized personnel only. Restricted portal. David entered his credentials with muscle memory, no hesitation, no uncertainty. The system accepted instantly, refreshing to reveal a profile framed in the corporate blue of First National. David Williams. Principal shareholder. Ownership stake, 73%. Position, Chairman of the Board. Security clearance, Level 10. Next scheduled meeting, emergency session, 3 o'clock today. The lobby gasped as one. The sound of a dropped radio clattered against the marble, echoing like a gunshot. Sarah Mitchell's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. The cameras captured every pixel, every word, as the live stream surged to 3,000 viewers and counting. Comments became unreadable, a flood of emojis and frantic typing. He owns the bank. Marcus is finished. This is insane. Wellington's voice cracked as he tried to laugh again, the sound thin, brittle. Fake software, he insisted, waving a trembling hand. Anyone could program that. But the sweat beading on his forehead betrayed him. David tilted the tablet toward the crowd, rotating it slowly so every camera, every witness, could see. The profile was undeniable, layered with security watermarks, corporate seals, and real-time data no scammer could fake. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye turned to Wellington. The man who had just burned a $2.3 million check in front of witnesses now stared at the owner of the bank itself. David finally spoke, his voice calm, resonant, cutting through the charged air like a blade. Mr. Wellington, you didn't just humiliate me. You burned my money. $2,347,000. On camera. In front of thousands. His words fell with deliberate weight, each syllable hammering into the marble floor as if to etch them permanently. The crowd shifted, the mood swinging violently. Where moments before they had applauded Wellington, now they recoiled from him as though his arrogance were contagious. The Chanel woman lowered her eyes, her earlier applause echoing back like a curse. The businessman who had muttered approval now cleared his throat, face pale. Even the guard stepped back slightly, no longer sure who stood accused and who stood in command. David lifted his watch, checking it with calm finality. 3 o'clock. The meeting was beginning, and he was exactly where he needed to be. He turned his gaze back to Marcus, his calm expression carrying more authority than any shouted order. You've been performing for the cameras, Marcus. Now let's show them the truth. The audience erupted, not with applause this time, but with a rush of shocked whispers, frantic typing, and disbelief spilling across every device. The performance had changed hands. The man who had been treated like a criminal was now revealed as the master of the stage. And in that moment, the power balance of the entire room collapsed and reformed around one undeniable fact. The man in the hoodie owned the bank. The silence inside the bank was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the tapping of David's fingers across the tablet in his hands. Every eye had shifted away from him and now burned into Marcus Wellington, the man who just moments earlier had strutted across the marble floor like a conqueror. The cameras that had once glorified his arrogance now framed him in a merciless spotlight. David's voice cut through the stillness, calm but edged with iron. Marcus Wellington. Branch Manager, Downtown Chicago. Employee ID 4847. Hired March 15, 2018. Annual salary $127,000. Performance rating, satisfactory. Direct Supervisor, Regional Manager Jennifer Hayes. Emergency Contact, Linda Wellington, spouse. He lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Marcus, and for the first time the manager flinched. The words had stripped away his expensive suit and rehearsed authority, leaving him naked before the crowd. David swiped again, the screen glowing brighter. You've been working for me for exactly 6 years and 8 months, Marcus. The crowd rippled with shock, a few gasps escaping. The Chanel woman who had applauded earlier took a step backward, her hands clutching her handbag tightly. The businessman who had praised Marcus for his so-called backbone stared at the floor, his face pale. Even the teenagers, once eager to capture the drama, hesitated, their laughter replaced with uneasy silence. David's tone did not rise, but its weight increased with each word. You burned a check worth $2,347,000. Not only was it legitimate, but it was a dividend payment from this bank to me, its majority shareholder. His voice remained steady, but the impact landed like thunder. By destroying it, Marcus, you committed more than an act of arrogance. You committed a federal crime. The word struck the room like a gavel. A crime. The live stream exploded with comments, thousands of viewers hammering out reactions. Jail time. He's done. Federal offense. This is unreal. Wellington's face drained of color, sweat forming on his brow despite the cool air. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his tongue fumbling for words that refused to come. David turned the screen again so the crowd could see the highlighted passage from the U.S. Criminal Code. Section 1341. Destruction of legitimate financial instruments. Maximum penalty, 20 years imprisonment and fines up to $1 million. The text glowed coldly under the fluorescent light, undeniable and damning. The guards who had once moved to cuff David now shifted uneasily, their posture stiff, eyes flicking between their radios and the trembling man in the tailored suit. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, whispering faintly to herself, "Oh my God." David lowered the tablet slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. He was not performing for the cameras, yet every word felt crafted for history. What happened here today was not fraud prevention. It was discrimination. It was arrogance. And it was criminal. The weight of the truth pressed down on Marcus like iron shackles. His knees buckled slightly, his once confident stance collapsing under the eyes of those who had cheered him only minutes before. A murmur spread through the crowd, shame and discomfort seeping into their faces. The Chanel woman edged toward the door, no longer eager to be associated with the spectacle. The businessman adjusted his tie nervously, avoiding Marcus's gaze. The teenagers lowered their phones, uncertain whether filming was still entertainment or evidence. The live-stream comments reflected the shift, once a tide of applause for Wellington, now a storm of condemnation. This man is finished. He humiliated his own boss. Karma in real time. Marcus swallowed hard, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. If I had known who you were, sir," David's voice cut him off with surgical precision. "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You acted not based on facts, not based on policy, but based on assumptions. Based on the color of my skin. Based on the clothes I wear. And for that arrogance, you've humiliated yourself more than you ever humiliated me." The room was silent again, but this time it was not complicit silence. It was judgment, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on Marcus from all directions. David held the tablet like a judge's gavel, not raised in anger but steady with authority. "This isn't just about me, Marcus. This is about every customer who ever walked into this branch and was treated as less than human because someone like you thought appearance determined worth." His words settled over the crowd, reaching beyond Marcus, forcing each person to confront their own part in the spectacle. The elderly woman who had clapped earlier turned red, shrinking into herself. The businessman who had nodded along now shook his head slowly, regret flickering across his face. David returned his attention to the manager, his tone calm but final. "You burned my check, Marcus. But what you really burned was your integrity, your career, and the trust of every person who saw what you did." His words hung in the air like a sentence already passed. Marcus trembled visibly, his once sharp voice reduced to a rasp. The ash pile on the floor no longer symbolized David's humiliation. It symbolized Marcus's downfall. And in that reversal, in that silent collapse of arrogance into shame, the balance of justice was restored. 3:05 p.m. The numbers on the live stream climbed past 6,000, each second pulling in more viewers as word of the spectacle spread. The crowd inside the bank stood frozen, phones raised, breaths shallow, as though the marble lobby had become a courtroom and they were trapped inside the trial of the year. At the center of it all, David Williams remained calm, the tablet steady in his hand, his gaze fixed on Marcus Wellington. "Mr. Wellington," David said evenly, "you have two choices." His voice carried across the lobby, quiet but inescapable, amplified by silence. "Option 1, you issue a public apology, here and now, to to me, to every customer in this branch, and to the thousands watching online. You accept immediate demotion, salary reduction, financial restitution, and mandatory community service. You submit to accountability." He paused, letting the words settle like heavy stones. "Or option 2. Immediate termination for cause. Forfeiture of pension and benefits. Formal referral to federal authorities for destruction of financial documents. And Marcus, every second of this incident has been recorded. The evidence against you is overwhelming." The silence tightened like a noose. The live stream chat flared alive. "Make him choose. Terminate him. No mercy." But some voices typed softer words. "Let him apologize. Teach him." A digital jury arguing in real time. Marcus's lips parted, his voice cracked, thin and desperate. "This is fake. It has to be fake. The card, the tablet, all of it. You're running some elaborate con." His words shook, conviction absent, but his pride refused to let go. David did not blink. He simply raised the tablet slightly, his finger hovering over a glowing option on the screen. "Termination for cause." His tone hardened. "You have 60 seconds, Marcus. The countdown begins now." The wall clock glowed 3:06 p.m. The seconds ticked audibly in the hush. The guards shifted uncomfortably, caught between authority and awe. Sarah Mitchell typed furiously at her station, documenting every word, every moment. Marcus's face contorted, panic breaking through the last of his arrogance. He looked to the crowd, searching for allies, but saw only cold eyes and glowing phone screens. The Chanel woman who had applauded earlier stared down at her shoes. The businessman who had praised him wouldn't meet his gaze. Even the teenagers, once entertained, now looked uneasy. The live stream comments scrolled faster. 30 seconds. David's voice cut through again, low, implacable. 30 seconds remain. Choose wisely, because unlike the assumptions you made about me, this decision defines you. Marcus's knees bent slightly, his body swaying as though gravity itself had turned against him. His voice cracked into a whisper, almost lost in the hum of the lights. I choose option 1. Louder, David commanded. "Face the cameras, not me." Marcus turned with visible effort, his skin pale, his eyes glassy. His voice trembled, but every word carried across the live stream. "I, Marcus Wellington, sincerely apologize to Mr. David Williams for my discriminatory behavior. I destroyed his personal property, I treated him with prejudice, and I disrespected him. My actions were wrong, illegal, and inexcusable." The live stream exploded. Comments fired like sparks. "Too late. Make him pay. At least he admits it. This is justice." David let the words hang, then nodded once. "Sarah, prepare the paperwork reflecting Mr. Wellington's demotion, salary reduction, restitution, and probation." She responded instantly, "Yes, Mr. Williams," her hands flying over the keyboard. David turned back to the crowd, his expression still calm, but his words shifted from judgment to transformation. "Effective immediately, this branch will implement the Dignity First protocol. Every customer, regardless of appearance, clothing, or perceived wealth, will be treated with equal respect. Staff will greet each customer within 30 seconds, maintain courtesy throughout, and operate under zero tolerance for bias." Phones recorded as his voice carved new policy into the marble of the bank's history. But he was not finished. Quarterly training on unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and professional service standards will be mandatory for all employees. Independent monitors will review interactions monthly. Raises and promotions will depend partially on these scores. The crowd listened, rapt, the live stream chat turning from jeers to awe. "He's changing the system. This is bigger than punishment." David continued, his voice steady. We will establish anonymous feedback systems, community advisory meetings, and direct reporting channels to my office. Prejudice will not live here again. He walked slowly to the ashes still scattered on the floor, crouching slightly to pick up a fragment between his fingers. These ashes will not be swept away. They will be preserved, framed, and displayed in this lobby as a reminder of the cost of assumptions. Phone zoomed closer, capturing the dark fragment in his hand, a symbol now larger than its value. From the humiliation of one man came the foundation of change. The live stream count hit 7,000. Viewers watched not just the downfall of a manager, but the birth of reform. Justice had not ended with humiliation. It had grown into something greater. And as Marcus stood broken before the cameras, David had transformed ashes into accountability, arrogance into apology, and prejudice into policy. The reckoning was complete. 6 months later the marble lobby of First National looked different. Sunlight fell on a glass display case near the entrance, and inside rested the preserved ashes of a burned check. A brass plaque beneath it read the cost of assumptions. Visitors slowed as they passed, some whispering to their children, others taking photos, all reminded of the moment arrogance turned into accountability. The memorial had become more than decoration, it was a symbol, a warning, and a lesson captured in ash. The video of that day had reached tens of millions of views across every platform, translated into classrooms and corporate training rooms, dissected by professors and activists alike. What began as humiliation had grown into a movement, a case study in how prejudice becomes policy and how one man's calm response can bend the arc of an entire system. In a small community center miles away from the gleaming bank, another transformation was unfolding. Marcus Wellington, once the arrogant manager, now sat across from a young Latino couple clutching a folder of rejected loan applications. Their voices trembled as they explained their dream of opening a bakery, the rejections they faced, the walls they could not scale. Marcus listened. Really listened. His posture was no longer rigid with superiority but bent forward in patience. He explained debt-to-income ratios, offered practical steps, and showed them alternative programs. For the first time in their banking experience, someone treated them as capable partners instead of risks to be managed. "Thank you," the young wife whispered, tears welling. No banker ever explained this before. Marcus nodded quietly, feeling the weight of every past mistake. The arrogance that once burned a man's worth to ashes had been replaced with humility learned one Saturday at a time. Behind the glass door, unnoticed, David Williams stood watching. He did not interrupt, did not announce his presence. He simply observed. 6 months earlier Marcus had been a performer for prejudice, now he was a student of empathy, slowly unlearning what arrogance had taught him. David turned away, satisfied not because justice had been served but because change had taken root. Across the country universities used the burned check incident as curriculum. Northwestern sociology students debated it as a living case study. Business schools highlighted the Dignity First protocol as a model for customer service reform. Even government agencies cited it in training manuals. The story had leapt from one bank lobby into society's bloodstream. Social media called it the fireproof worth movement, a phrase born from a comment thread that became a rallying cry. Hashtags turned into workshops, workshops into policy shifts. Banks and other cities adopted monitoring systems, retailers built dignity protocols, and corporate leaders realized that respect was not optional but essential for survival. Yet the most profound change was not in policy or profits. It was in individuals. A banker who once clapped at prejudice now admitted her shame in a public interview. Teenagers who filmed that day wrote essays about bias for college applications. And Marcus himself, week by week, carried binders of worksheets into the Southside Financial Literacy Center, teaching families he once dismissed how to navigate a system he had once weaponized against them. Troton had become seeds. The check that burned on marble had burned more than numbers, it burned open a path for growth. The memorial at First National stood as both wound and warning, a reminder that dignity denied can destroy trust, but dignity restored can rebuild it. As the center's clock struck 9, Marcus greeted another family at his table, his tone calm, his manner patient. He still carried the memory of ashes, but now they guided him. David, speaking months later at a university auditorium, summed it simply. They can burn your check, but they cannot burn your worth. Those ashes were not an ending. They were a beginning. And from them, change spread farther than fire ever could. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.